Hi, this is Filiberto Amati. I'm a partner at Amati and Associates in Warsaw, and we are here today for the next session on our research on the future of events. We have an esteemed guest from Philips today, and I'll let Marco Bevolo take the lead to introduce our guest. Marco?
Thank you. Thank you, Filiberto. Well, it's really a pleasure to have Claudia Lisot here with us today. Claudia is a principal design research at Philips Design. She's an alumni of the Design Academy Eindhoven. And most of all, she is part of my professional history because together we developed Culture Scan, the cultural and aesthetic trends program at Philips Design. Together we have worked on several programs and projects in design strategy and in design futures. And together we shared the stage, the workshop room, and any other kind of corporate and cultural events as situations, as performances. Claudia has been directing the Trends Lab of Philips Design when after I left and for the last years. But I would like to ask her actually what is currently her portfolio and what are her main interests, because she's also contributing at events and at programs in the cultural sector, most notably the last one at Baltang Laboratories in Eindhoven on co-emerging futures. So Claudia, would you like to tell us a couple of words about you, your background, and everything I don't know about you yet, in spite we know each other for nearly 25 years.
Okay, thanks Marco and Filiberto for having me today. My name is Claudia Lisot. I'm investigating trends at Philips Design, and indeed we have a history together at Philips and Marco. Along the way, a lot of trend research has changed throughout the years. Also, the focus, Philips has been focusing more on healthcare since 2016. So that also means that a lot of the trend research that we do is focusing on health, and then specifically on professional health, because that is, well, those are the clients I work for the most. And yeah, that also changed a lot in the typical trend research that we have been doing, because it's not so much about what is kind of happening in terms of taste or what is kind of happening in terms of culture. It's really about almost like a dominant influencer coming from technology, but also how people are responding to that. So we're investigating a lot in social cultural trends still, but really to find out what is the impact on people's lives, and when will people be ready for a certain technology. I would say that we still try to gain a lot of input also from non-healthcare related sources, but it's much less of how we did it in the past. Because also of the different audiences that we have to serve. So this means that they really would like to know what is going to be the future of healthcare and what is influencing that, but also that it is based on reliable sources and sources that they also know, which is not so easy sometimes because I don't have a medical background. So that means that I have to also collaborate a lot with other people in the organization that have a medical background, and then by collaborating with them, we create reports such as the future of oncology or the future of cardiology to really dive deeper into that. So it has been a lot of learning the last 5 years, I have to say.
Thank you. Actually, Filiberto and I share a lot in terms of experiences because for example, a big fair like IFA or CES We all attended at different times in our Philips history. The Dutch Design Week or equivalent design weeks, Milan, we attended even together, you and I, Claudia, 20 years ago. You work with a number of suppliers in trend research, or you have worked like the Trend Laboratory in the UK. We exchange interests on the cultural sector. I would like to ask Filiberto to formulate for you one or two questions about the specific observations that you have in relationship with events in the last year and a half since the corona pandemic, what changed and what not. Filiberto, would you like to please elaborate a little bit?
No, but very easily, I think that we know that the pandemic has changed a bit our lives, but it's also accelerated a number of trends. And I know as well that a lot of those trends have been accelerated also in the healthcare sector. For a fact, I think that in the past 18 months, the only time I actually have seen a doctor was through telemedicine. So that is my personal experience. But beyond my personal experience, I would like to understand what have you noticed, what kind of trends have accelerated because of the pandemic in what is the operation day-to-day of healthcare and in what is of the business of healthcare. So how Philips conducts his business within the segment, with the various players, within the ecosystem, events and beyond, of course.
Okay, so there are a couple of questions in there, so I will try to see if I can answer all of them. So in terms of the general trends that the pandemic has accelerated for healthcare, then of course telehealth is one of the biggest, so the one you just mentioned. And the interesting thing of that is that telehealth was already there for quite some time, but it has never come to a certain tipping point. So everybody was kind of saying, now that is the future of healthcare. People can access their doctor anytime, anywhere. But there were several reasons why this was not happening yet, because of either people were not able to work with the system, for example, and that could be for patients and doctors. But the reimbursement part was also a big problem actually, because a physical visit was reimbursed because that was really a consult, but a telehealth appointment was not. And because of the pandemic, a lot of governments actually changed that reimbursement part. So it was possible in a way, and that meant that a lot of things could be done by telehealth for now. The question now, I think, is that will that remain? So already doctors see that there are certain things that you can do via telehealth and certain things you can't. So it would be interesting to see how this will evolve over time. And there are already professionals, healthcare professionals that say, well, there are only certain parts that we do via telehealth now because we still, for certain parts, we really want to see the patient. Now, one other thing that definitely accelerated through the pandemic was also, and that's also related to healthcare, you have to, if you're not physically there, then you also have to have access to data. So the seamless access of data and how people can make use of that data also became quite of an issue, because also that is not always organized in a very convenient way. And I would say we're still not there, but in order to make it really this hybrid between virtual and physical, then this seamless data and that it is a trustworthy exchange needs to be established. And we're still not there yet. And you still see that people are still finding it difficult to share their data, or for example, now also with this new passport that they're talking about, this European passport to show that you are either had corona or that you have been vaccinated. Now, yeah, those kind of issues still remain. And it's really to see how that will grow in the future when the pandemic is kind of on its way back. Then on the other hand, what we also saw, yeah, as Philips, of course, that, the pandemic sold a lot of our products. So the respiratory products were high in demand, and they were so high in demand that we really had to scale up production. There were also issues with in America, for example, where we had a lot of the most of our production is done there for respiratory products, and the United States were claiming these products, so that also needs to be solved somehow. And so, yeah, on the one hand, we really saw that people were in need of certain products, and it also started Philips to think about what is it that we can do on the short term, but also what is it that we can do to support that more virtual way of working. So thinking of different services, thinking of different business models to make sure that having healthcare remotely, or this increase of access to care, how to support that. And that also got a bit into we had to speed up with that, because that was definitely needed. What we also saw, and I think one of the events that I wanted to mention, because there was of course the IFA, but actually a better example was the ECR. So that's the European Congress of Radiology, and that was in March this year. And that was fully digital. So that was a conference you could attend. We had a virtual stand there. And if you would go to the website of Philips, then you could access that stand, and then you could even customize your own content. So you could see speakers, but you could also have a one-to-one talk with, for example, between customers and different brands. And I thought, what it made it interesting is that, of course, you can still attend an event, but it still tried to kind of mimic how it would be in real life. So you would enter like a virtual space that looks a bit like a conference you would go to. The only thing that you miss, of course, is this mixture between different people. You could do that, but that, of course, was a bit more organized digitally. So you would have appointments, or you would have like Zoom appointments or breakout rooms or whatever. So that made it a little bit staged in a way. But what was an advantage, and that's also what we saw during the Dutch Design Week, I will also get back to that. The advantage was that you can still access the content. So even though you were not able to go to the event on the time that it was held, you can now still go to the website and you can see certain speakers, you can see certain, let's say, publications of it. Of course, not all is available anymore, but there's still some parts that you can access, and then it remains getting visitors on the site. And that's something that we also saw at the Dutch Design Week. So the European Congress of Radiology, that's really like our professional congress that we would go to as a brand every year. The Dutch Design Week is more like a sidestep that we do as Philips Design, where we try to represent the future of healthcare within the Embassy of Health. It's one of the world embassies that the Dutch Design Week is displaying on the Dutch Design Week, and there we show future probes that we develop with students. And last year we had quite a challenge because it was for a long time it was just not known what it would be. So we still thought, well, it's still quite far away. The Dutch Design Week, so it might still be physical, but at the very last minute, I think it was around August, it was said, no, we have to do it fully online. So that meant that we had to translate everything to an online representation of the Embassy of Health. Luckily, we already prepared ourselves videos. So we created, instead of physical probes, we created videos with students, and that was shown on the website of the Dutch Design Week. And I just checked it. Not all of it is available anymore, but partly you can still access. And for this year, it's also well, the emphasis is still to have a hybrid version. So it might be that it will be partly physical and partly mobile, partly digital. And that's what we're aiming for, but we still try to make as much as possible digital in order to prepare ourselves, because you never know.
And before coming to an umbrella question, internally within Philips, because Philips Design has branch offices in China, in the States, in several European countries. I remember we spoke informally a few months ago, and you told me that your colleagues in Shanghai were already resorted to office life, basically in normal terms. Because what we look at is the future of business events, but we don't regard events only as conferences or workshops with a public profile, but also the internal meetings, the internal events, the visit from a supplier. We had so many through the years with all sorts of suppliers from all over the world coming and presenting, interacting. What did you observe on the internal front of what you could call an event? So not a meeting or a review meeting, but more an event within the team, within the company. We ran together in the past events to create a bonding across teams all over the world. What changes do you observe and do you expect to still have in the future about this class of micro events that are a bit the lifeline of the social life of the company?
What happened was that in let's say March 2020, when we all had to stay home, from that point on, we migrated so completely to all kinds of digital tools, such as Teams, but also Miro was a very important one, because within our organization we do a lot of workshops, we do a lot of indeed internal events to share best cases or to have annual meetings with, let's say, all the satellites of design. Now for that part we did not do last year, so we didn't have an annual meeting where it was online. We do have what we call certain town hall meetings, but that is again calling in via Teams. So that's another way of sharing different cases or different presentations between teams. So that's not that different, I would say. I think where it becomes more like radical in a way is the way that we converted our posted exercises and our sessions in teams where you would indeed travel to a certain location. We do that all via Miro now. So everything is basically done via Miro, and Miro is a collaboration tool where you can basically do all kinds of things that you would normally do in a workshop. So you would work with Post-its, you have an enormous infinite whiteboard, you have different documents you could put in. So it's the same kind of way how you would do it physically, but then you would do it totally online. And what surprised me was, because in design, we really like to have discussions and create together, and having different teams, different capabilities together to to share experiences and to collaborate. And that via this tool, it also worked. And there are, of course, a certain parts that you will miss. So this kind of more, let's say, getting together moment and getting to know each other, that is not happening, because that's the way it goes. You have a time to start, and then you probably have an introduction round, and that is basically it. But the collaboration tool worked really well for us. And I think even though we will move more back towards office life again, and indeed Shanghai has done that already, that is a tool that will remain. So we would even say, oh, will we ever use a physical post-it anymore? I don't know. I doubt it, because it's so easy, and so everything is documented in one place that everybody can access at any time. Because that was always the difficulty when you have like a huge template on the wall and you have populated it with all kinds of material, or where you share certain material with people. Yeah, when the event is over, then it needs to be documented somehow, and maybe it will be sent around. But in this case, it will stay alive, and people can still access it when that event or when that workshop or whenever is ended.
So Miro is definitely the e-tool for trend research that we were looking for 20 years ago, and we had a little disagreement, you and I, about developing e-tools for trend research, but I'm talking about the time before the mobile phone. I would like to ask Filiberto to join in on this digitalization aspect. There are several applications. You use Miro. We have experienced, I have experienced AirMeet with the Philips Design alumni meeting that you could not attend because you are still at Philips Design and I'm not. Other people use Mural. I would like Filiberto to join in back and to bring this digitalization topic to more mature than I can do.
No, to be honest with you, I use Miro with a lot of my clients, especially when we map ecosystems. It's a great way to have a broad overview, and then you can focus on one part from the ecosystem, identify the players, map even personas and build personas around it, and then work all the possible connection flows that could be related to data, information, transactions, influence, and I love it. So I understand where it goes. But building on my experience actually on the ecosystem, I wanted to step back and think about the business of healthcare, which is where Claudia is now focused with her Philips experience. Because you have a high technology product or sets of products, okay, platform of products. And you have users who are not necessarily understanding how the technology works. Okay, so an MRI technician is an MRI technician. A doctor wants to understand what the MRI does, to the extent that they need to understand what the patient has and what's the outcome for the patient. But an MRI is pretty sophisticated. And then there are stakeholders that are the ones who take decisions on which technology, which type of MRI, which supplier, which providers, what kind of maintenance, what kind of service contracts, and so on and so forth. And those guys are probably more business type of. So you have a complex ecosystem, okay? How has the digitalization and the move towards a digital more approach based on selling, and forget about the peak in demand, which we discussed about and which was in the newspapers for respirators, for ICUs, and so on and so on. How has digitalization helped or negatively impacted some of the interaction, because of course, you know who you need to sell to, but you need to also teach users. You also need to make sure that the technician is up to speed with new versions of firmware updates or whatever it is. So where technology played in favor and where technology played against in this new reality?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can just answer that in just only a few sentences, because indeed it's a super complex ecosystem that you're talking about. And indeed, we have many stakeholders. So we have the C-suite that is looking towards what is the best for the hospital and what is the best brand that positions our hospital, but also will it eventually save costs. The doctor needs to make sure that it's getting most of the benefit out of the machine, and that really the patient is really taken care of with that machine. People have to, like technicians, they have to work with it. They also have to make sure that they stay up to date with what the machine can do, but also what happens if the machine breaks down. And of course, the patient as well as an important stakeholder, that whenever it's going through a scanning, that it feels comfortable, that it is not anxious. So there are a lot of perspectives that we have to take into account. And
I'm sorry if I interrupt you, but in a way, your business is the business to manage an event, because going through an MRI scan is an event, not a business event, not a cultural event, but it's an experience that starts and ends, and there's a certain characteristics in between. So
yeah, it's actually it always has two sides. So there is the clinical side, almost like the clinical event, where you indeed think about the right diagnosis, the right treatment, making sure that you know what kind of disease this person has, that you are in time. But there's also the operational event. So that is about the throughput time where the patients are going through, let's say what does it do in terms of costs? Is it performing the way the way the hospital wants it to perform? So those are two sides of the coin, which makes it also complicated because they also have different issues, different needs that you have to address. So that also means that within my job and also with my colleagues that are doing design research, that we indeed investigate the future, but also that we investigate like what is currently happening in the hospital, what is currently the landscape that we're looking at, what is the whole journey that the patient is going through, but what is the journey that the doctor is going through, and what is the journey that the technician is going through. So we have to have this almost like 4D look at this context, and how technology actually plays a part in it, or where you could say like it has accelerated or not. I think what we discussed already is that the digital part is becoming more and more important, but that was also something that we already foresee for a couple of years now, where we see that there is a lack of professionals. So if you can do certain things remotely, if there's, for example, a surgeon that is in New York that would do a surgery in Los Angeles from a distance, that is something that we really see upcoming now. And especially in the United States, there are these hospital deserts. So it means that in some parts of the country, there is just no access to a hospital in the next, let's say, 400 kilometers, which means that also the functions in the hospitals kind of need to be shared somehow. They need to work in almost like virtual teams. That is something that we already saw happening, but perhaps by this pandemic has even accelerated more. And what also is another important aspect is that we have become so savvy ourselves with all kinds of digital tools. We have an iPad, we have an iPhone, we have our laptop. We know how things are working, and it's also that easiness that you have with apps, and that easiness that you have with certain services in let's say more like the retail world, for example, is also something that healthcare professionals expect as well from our systems, that it is easy to do a scanning, that it is easy to access data, that whenever something's wrong with a product, it's broken or it's not working really well, that you have direct access to someone that is going to help you. So the expectations in terms of digital have gone through the roof, but at the same time, it's not always possible to do that because of this complex environment.
You mentioned the virtual reality, and actually the way hospitals could be structured with a desert around looks a bit the way corporations are reorganizing their own estate and their own offices. So no more fancy headquarters, but a lot of regional meeting centers. And that's a trend that that is happening now, especially in the Netherlands. But you mentioned virtual reality, and I was wondering, because when we used to work together at Philips Design in the trend research practice, trend research was very much a job of visiting a lot of fairs, scanning a lot of magazines and books and sources, and then making the connections and the transferring, where if you probably remember, I had dialogues with Toyota, with Fiat, it was not Fiat Chrysler yet, but Lancia, and these automotive companies were interested about the top expertise that our team had on plastics, pigments, color roadmaps. And therefore we were transferring a knowledge that was accumulated because of the need to mold plastic with color pigments into TVs or into water cooking machines. We could transfer it to the automotive sector. And the same, we developed certain insights about the technological roadmap in the area of wearables. And then we could work with Levi's or Nike to transfer what we learned, because actually we had semiconductors, components, and so on. How do you see the transferring of technologies that you observe, virtual reality, AR, what you observe in the medical field to the domain of events, fairs, shows, workshops? Would you expect any of these star technologies to, in 5 years, to become normal, to have a meeting like this? Maybe we could have this meeting in 5 years in virtual reality and all sit around a virtual table for real, but virtual.
Yeah.
So where do you see the possible points of connection?
Yeah, I think also for AR, VR, I think that's also one of these technologies that always was a promise in a way, but it was always kind of difficult to make people really enthusiastic in making it part of their work. So if I would compare it to the healthcare world, that is, it has to kind of fit in the protocol, so that it makes part of it's adding really a benefit to the way that doctors work, and it's not adding more work to it. And I think that is sometimes still a struggle. It also has to do with the education that healthcare professionals get. So I think that there is quite, there is the key to it. So whenever you want it to be embraced by the healthcare professionals, then you see that education is a really important part. You have to make it part of the medical education. Medical education is quite traditional still. So keeping up with these new tools is not so easy. And I think that is also what makes it difficult, even though we see AR, VR becoming part of a lot of other industries and also our industry as well. But it's hard to keep up with the latest developments and really making it part of the education of a healthcare professional.
Do you think this, I'm sorry. But do you think this will transfer to the event sector?
Yeah, I think it's more, it has been almost like the other way around, so that we learn much more about AR, VR when it comes, for example, from the gaming world, where it actually has been developed for, more like in the sector of entertainment and indeed events, and that almost kind of entered our healthcare world as well. I think it's more the other way around than that we invented AR, VR, and that went to the event world. I don't think it's like that. What we also see is that a lot of the gaming aspects are now started to be taken into account, because I still feel that even though a lot of events are online nowadays, it's not that different from what it was. So it's you see a couple of presentations, you probably meet some people, and that is basically it. But really looking into events that are taking it to the next level, those are the ones that have encapsulated the gaming experience. So they really try to create a story where you're part of, and within that story you can go in several different chapters. So it gives you a completely different experience from what a physical event would be. So I think that is where the advantages of AR, VR is to really see what is the extra benefit that it can deliver. And in terms of healthcare, you see that, for example, when it comes to diagnosing and planning a treatment for a patient, then it becomes interesting because, for example, when different cardiologists are working together on a plan for a patient to do a certain treatment, they can take a digital twin of the heart of the patient, which is actually a digital model of the data coming from the patient, and that's created in a heart. And then with AR, VR, they can already start to kind of practice in like, okay, if we come from this side and we do it like this, then we can really enter the problem. So they're already planning ahead by taking a virtual representation of the patient, which can already show like what is the percentage that this is going to work or not. And are we going to do it in this way? Are we going to try it in a different way instead of already opening up the patient, which is quite invasive? So there are definitely some benefits there. And I think it's more of really looking into what is the benefit that AR and VR is giving us instead of, oh, it's just another gimmick that we're going to
the learning happens from technological or methodological point of view, from what you learn in medical, in healthcare, in digital healthcare, towards other sectors. But if I understand well, and please just very synthetically, you also learn a lot from game, media, event themselves, and you learn in these high-tech digital technologies, applications, world, you learn from these other sectors. Is it correct?
Yeah. So what we see in other sectors, what is like the extra thing that you get with this technology, and what can this technology do that, for example, we humans cannot? So what is the extra thing that it delivers to us? And what will then be a benefit to us by, for example, implementing this in a workflow of a doctor? So, and that is almost kind of let's say the volgorde, the sequence it should go, instead of, let's add this AR, VR to our products and then people will love it. You really have to show what it does for you.
Yeah. Filiberto?
I know, it's funny you mentioned that because it's exactly what happened with the 3D TVs back then, which we were trying to kill, you remember, Marco? Where, let's add it because this is cool. This is going to be the next big thing. And then, of course, was probably the biggest flop for the sector. But I would say that what you said is very interesting because it is true that VR and augmented reality did a lot of had a lot of results in games and entertainment, but in particularly, I think that they are an interesting platform for the gamification of learning, where not only, and of course, there is a part of the doctors working together, but there is a part of the doctor-patient relationship where there is an educational component in addition to, when the diagnosis is basically an educational component where the doctor is trying to explain to someone who doesn't necessarily know a lot about the heart, how the heart works. But I think it's also goes back to what you mentioned earlier of the complexity of the healthcare ecosystem, where you need to interact with a lot of different cultures, different people with different stakes in the business, different competences in the business. And that gamification part could be a catalyst for the educational approach within the sector.
Yeah.
So I agree that there is a lot to that. Per se, the technology, I'm almost find boring. I mean, thinking that we're going to have avatars going to events, and I've tried that, by the way. I don't see how, it's fun. It's fun like watching Avatar, the movie in 3D once. But then if I watch the movie, I'll probably rewatch it normally as it is, without having to go to the 3D part ever again.
Yeah, I think it's indeed the educational part which makes it really powerful, because students now can, for example, practice a lot on digital models of patients, so they can do certain procedures over and over to already have some sort of experience already, which they didn't have in the past. So that is definitely a tool that is very promising for students, for healthcare students. And on the other hand, AR/VR is also used for patients to for certain treatments. So, for example, mental health. There are some games that are used to for patients that have mental issues to train them in certain aspects, or to go through certain experiences. For example, if they have a phobic problem, and also when it comes to pain management. So it has been proven that when a patient has an AR/VR goggle and is watching a certain simple game or a certain visual representation of a landscape or something, that it experiences less pain than it would have if it didn't wear an AR/VR goggle. And that is also very beneficial for the patient, because it doesn't have to go through really big painkillers or being completely put to sleep, for example. So, and also therapeutic. So whenever stroke patients are also helped, for example, with AR/VR to do certain exercises, and especially the gaming part makes it interesting, because often when people have to do these exercises after a stroke, they are not so adhere. They do not adhere so easily, because it's boring and it's not really showing any progress. But when it is turned into a game, then it becomes competitive, and then people are changing their behavior slightly. They want to be the best. They want to win. So then it shows that these type of games are really helping to let patients progress in their healing process.
One thing that you actually you touched upon, and Filiberto mentioned twice or more times the reality of ecosystems. One thing that really pertained our job as we used to perform it 10, 20 years ago was the facilitation. And I have not read it. I have to fully disclose that I have not read it, but I received a report by Mika Altonen and Paulo Martinez for the International Association of Facilitators, Future of Facilitation, Leadership, Influence and Impact in Disruptive Times. How do you think your job, your role as leader of in design research, in trends, but also as a facilitator of these exchange we discussed among industries, among competencies, among disciplines, will evolve in the new landscape of partially virtual, digital events?
Yeah, I think it's. I would also like to, if you can, read that publication.
I will.
Mentioned. Yeah, what I see, but that's from my own experience, is that now having all the events that we do, so all the getting togethers that we do internally, and facilitating them, that it really requires almost like new etiquette, so that simple things such as you have to wait until someone has end their sentences. You really have to point out to people, and now it's your turn, and now it's your turn. So that it's a very different way of interacting than in real life. I always do not find it always that, let's say, dynamic. It's a bit static in a way. And I also noticed that whenever you do a mixed one, which is now coming up again because we're also going back to the office more and more, that is a difficult one, because then we're now so used to being completely online that everybody is in the same situation. So everybody is behind their screen, which makes it easier sometimes to facilitate, rather than having a few that are not online and they are all together in a room, for example. Whenever it's still one way, so for example, there's a panel discussion or something, then it's relatively easy. But when it's really like a collaborative session where you all have to do certain things together, then I have to be honest, I didn't find the sweet spot yet. It's when you are online, everybody hears each other, but when the people who are not online, they often do not hear, or the other way around. Or so that I think is still an opportunity to explore, because in the future there will be more of these mixed sessions, I think, because also what we see now in the office is that some of the people of our community, they quite like this setting actually. So there will not be in the office as much as others will be. So the future will probably be this more digital context that we look at. So we kind of have to reinvent that, because we didn't have, not really, we didn't have that before. We even said in the past, like if we would have a workshop or an event together and some people were asking, can we call in? Then we would also say, no, sorry, that is not possible. That's too disturbing. So that kind of new setting we have to figure out, I think.
and you are also a member of the advisory board of the Fontis Academy for, well, it used to be International Lifestyle Studies, and now it's called, I think, maybe Concepting and Trend Watching. I
Yeah.
don't, so you observe the educational sector, you observe the cultural sector. I remember we spoke recently, you mentioned how you were excited by the evolution of the museum sector in terms of virtual representation. If you look at education and the cultural sector, could you tell us very briefly, thinking about events and education for events and so on, what would be for you the kind of couple of highlights that we should look about? Well, in trend research, you and I, we were always looking for the city, the designer, the show. If you remember, at a certain point, we said copper is the new black, because we were always looking for the spot where you would identify what was coming, what was upcoming. If you look at education, what do you think will come? If you look at museums, why do you think it's very relevant for what will come to the event sector in particular?
Yeah, I think if I especially look at the education towards indeed concepting and trend research, I think definitely they have to investigate the digital space more. I don't think they do that a lot still, but not necessarily in terms of looking up stuff, but more what is actually happening to people. So really investigate what this digital space does to people and what kind of future needs will derive from that. I also believe that we have to look a lot more to the whole gaming world. And I would be the first to say I'm definitely not a gaming expert, and I would not even know where to start, to be honest. But it's definitely a space that we have to explore more and more. We also saw some fashion brands last year. Balenciaga, for example, they created a whole game around their new collection for the autumn and winter, and it's a completely new way of interacting with your client. And that is something that those kind of skills, I think new students have to learn and have to incorporate to make sure that this balance between digital and physical becomes more clear.
Yeah, more visible also.
Yeah, and I think in terms of museums, but I think that's also related to the education part. And that is also something that I found really a challenge last year, and still there is so much. So for now, I could probably visit, I don't know how many museums online if I want to. I could visit an enormous amount of events. There are events every week popping up. And so what makes you stand out? What makes you like a really interesting event to go to? I think also what the disadvantage of online is, or being remotely, is that it is easier to say, nah, not tonight, I'm too tired. And I can watch it and at any other time. So by really buying a ticket and going to a museum yourself makes it a bit much more of a need to go. And when it's online, yeah, it's always there. So you can always visit it. So I think it's really the part that makes it what makes it that people are attracted to a certain event at a certain time. That you really want to have them at a certain time all together and not just spread over months, for example. What makes you go to a museum, what makes it interesting. And I came across an exhibition from Boijmans van Beuningen. It's still there. I just checked it before the interview.
It's in Rotterdam.
It's in Rotterdam, and it's called the Afbreek Economy. So it's about sustainability and circular, and it's showing it is some sort of a virtual space that you go into, and you can click on certain objects, and you can click on the artists, and you can see a mixture of videos and a mixture of just a static image of an object. But it's really interesting how they have created that together. It's a low threshold. It's for free also, and I think that's also maybe a difficult thing, that people also expect online things for free.
Exactly.
But it's still an interesting topic. It's a topic that everybody wants to know more about, and it's also kind of 5 to 12 when it comes to sustainability and circular. So they did that really well, and it's also not too much. It's not something that takes you hours to go through, because also that is something that really shaped the interaction between people, but also the interaction that is happening on events. I participated in the Wired Health event, which was in beginning of April, and that all the presentations, I think it was only 15 to 20 minutes max. And if you would go there in real, like a couple of years ago, the presentations would be like 45 minutes to an hour. But they already have to take into account the concentration span of people by sitting in front of a screen. It's quite tiring. And if you have seen a presentation of an hour, you're kind of like, oh, no. So you're not really into the next one anymore. But at the same time, it means that there are like 40 presentations that you have to choose from. So it's really about how can we get the attention from people for certain events, and how can we make sure that it is still taking into account attention span, the concentration, how people are looking at it, but still making it attractive to see. So it's quite a challenge, I think.
Filiberto, thank you very much, Claudia, for these expansions. Filiberto, how would you like to round?
No, I just wanted to thank Claudia very much. It was really interesting. I think we have a lot of insights and wisdom for our research to chew on, but as well for us to think about in the future in terms of the role of technology and how the move to phygital it's gonna go. So Claudia, it was really a pleasure. Thank you very much. Yes. Final remarks, Marco?
Yeah, I only wanted to, for our viewers, I only wanted to clarify that they might have had the impression that this interview was less about events and more about technology or healthcare and other topics. But the idea was exactly to have a discussion about a fundamentally trend-setting sector in digital technology, in high tech, like healthcare, and to bring these insights, as we heard about virtual reality, gamification, to bring them from a different angle. Since we are a bit in the phase of exploring the landscape around the future of events, that's the multidisciplinary value of the interview. So if there are some hardcore event industry people in the audience, they should position the interview in the context of our methodology. Claudia, I sent you during the interview, I sent you the paper about the future of facilitation.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sure you could actually teach anyone else in the world about the future of facilitation yourself, since I have seen you for nearly 25 years, facilitating and directing and expressing leadership. Thank you so much, and to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.